Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Jim McKee. I live here in Easton. Have lived here for about 13 years. As a matter of background, engineered 20 years in the Navy, 26 years doing other things after that. So I think like an engineer, I try to have the social graces that they say we don't have as engineers. But in all of this, I can't be beat by machinery. So I'm going to talk about what originally started off as astrophotography in the dark Talbot County dark skies, and make it an introduction because I can't explain it all. Let's go to that. Do I have the remote?
No.
Yep, there we go. And I put my questions out front. And because there just aren't that many of us, this is very informal, seminar format if you want. Ask questions at any time, pipe up. But how many people here have had a telescope at one time in their life, as a kid, as an adult? I've got 2, 3, good. And that's sort of where I started, is as a kid looking out, out the window, cars coming down the road. But then in 1997, I had, that just get worse? Something changed. I had, in 97, I bought a reflector telescope. And I had that for about a year. I sat out in 30-degree weather and I looked at the stars. And they're just little white things. And after a while, that Zen experience passed. And I gave up on it. About 5 years ago, my son was in the backyard and he says, "Oh, look, there's Andromeda." And I couldn't see it. Eyes aren't that great. But he assured me it was there. And I did a little research and found the state of the art had moved on. And astrophotography was a lot easier than it was 25 years ago. So I'm going to talk a little about that and some of the prerequisites. And I'm going to talk about where the dark skies are. And I listed a couple of you. You can see them. I'm not going to read them. But around here, I know of 3 places. Or, I guess another question to everybody, who's been in a dark sky site or been out at sea beyond 50 miles where you can see all the stars? Anybody? There's so many stars out there. Yes, and you can't find the constellations, can you? It's really pretty amazing. I'm going to talk about the factors that affect why we can and can't see things on the Eastern Shore, what equipment, and then some basic concepts. And the only place where I'm going to get into a little bit of nerd technicalities and is talking about the various types of sensors and how they receive the light and why we get the pictures that we do. So. And this is just sort of a teaser of what we're going to talk about. This is out of my backyard. This is the Rosette Nebula, about 5,200 light years away, about 130 light years in diameter. And it's about a half a degree. It's about a half degree. It's about the size of the moon. The moon's a half a degree also. So I'm going to talk also about where do you look, what do you see, the equipment, as I said, some issues with photo capture and processing, and you will see more pictures. And I don't want to mislead people. Is this something you want to do? Is this something you want to dive into, or is it going to be a bottomless hole like so many other things that you can take on? What I'm not going to talk about are astrophysics. I'm a photographer by retirement trade. And I like processing and capture the nitty-gritty details of what I see. I don't pursue as much. I'm not going to get into maths or engineering details, although I'm happy to answer questions about those. Another example, and I'm going to use this one throughout, is the growth of what we're doing, or what I've been doing, all starting with Orion. Orion is the easiest to see. It's to the southeast. And that and Horsehead are all very close to each other. I'll show Horsehead in a minute. But this is what it looks like when you capture it very nicely. You can see this with binoculars. And I think it's one, I think it's this guy right here. I may be wrong again, not into the complete technical side of it. Let's see. Okay. There we go. And Horsehead's very close to that. Now, why do I show these two? I'm going to show you where I started and what captured my interest. But first, I'm going to talk about there are dark sky maps if you want to go look, if you want to just use a regular camera, if you want to see the Milky Way at night. You can go on dark skies. I didn't put a link here, but I can add that to the brief if anybody downloads the brief. And for me, I was just down last week shooting regular camera, 14 millimeter lens down in Blackwater, because that's about as dark as I can do without going down to Chesapeake or over to West Virginia. Let's go. Very quickly, there's a scale for this, portal 1 through 9, and I just give you examples. My son lives in New Zealand. I've been out in the desert in New Zealand. That's a portal 1. It's like being at sea. Blackwater's around portal 3. When I was out there, you can see Salisbury all the way to the south, and you can see Patuxent River all the way to the east. And they're big orange glows. Suburban Talbot County, where we are, probably about a portal 5, and that has house lights, street lights, sodium lights, all the stuff that makes it tough to see stars at night. This is what New Zealand looks like if you get about an hour and a half out of town. This is up in Castle Hill, New Zealand. And that's an instant exposure with a flash at the end of my son and his wife. And the amount of detail, the number of stars, I'll show you a picture of what I took in portal 3. This is portal 0 and 1.
How did you get the flash so you could get the picture of the kids, but also get the stars?
You do a time exposure, say a 30-second time exposure. He probably didn't have to do 30 seconds because the stars were so bright and he had such good contrast. And then before he closes the shutter, he hits the flash manually and it just flashes.
Oh, wow.
And it's got me. And if you ever watch, we've been trying to do this, there's not that many interesting things down at Blackwater, but it's always nice to have great scenery like you see at the bottom. So what can be seen? So I list the things when you use a naked eye, binoculars, telescope. It's really rather surprising. If you take a set of binoculars and look at Orion, also called M42, you can see it, but you're not going to see color. Everything we see is monochrome. Stars, of course, you can see the planets in the solar systems, all of the solar system objects, to include the occasional comet, and I've got one comet photograph. And you can see Orion, but it's very dim. What's interesting about Orion is it's 6 times the width of the moon. And a lot of people don't realize that. The moon's about a half degree, Orion's 3 degrees, 3 degrees wide. We'll talk about measurements here for a minute. And I'm going to talk about broadband, which is just white light, all the normal colors. I use what we all learned in school about YG-BIV. And then I shoot narrowband, and I'll show you why, because it shoots 3 discrete frequencies that give you a little bit more exciting photos, and also it completely excludes all the city lights and the moon.
That acts as a filter?
So yes, so these are all sodium, hydrogen, very narrow, 6 nanometer, 3 nanometer. They exclude anything outside like 490 nanometers to either side of 3 degrees. So it's just looking, and I'll show you that. Planets. I put the note here. Planets is a different kind of shooting. You got to have a longer scope, and you shoot what's called lucky imaging. You almost shoot a video of it because they're so small and the atmosphere is so mixed that you essentially take 600 pictures and then you run it through the processor and it averages out everything, and that's how you see some really nice pictures by amateurs of planets.
Okay. So you need software to process all
I'm going to get into that. Yes, you need software
You
to
talk
process
about
all
it,
this.
yes.
I'm going to either repeat what he says or there's others instructed. Some numbers. A lot of times people have asked me, well, do you see them change? You know, can you see something getting bigger or smaller? Light year's 5.8 trillion miles. The spaceship that returned the sample from asteroid Bennu just did, I think, about round trip of about 3 to 5 billion miles. It took 3 years. So, you know, do the math. This is why we can't go anywhere fun. And just to put that now, multiply that by 88,000 for the size of the Milky Way, and 88,000 times 6. It's a gazillion miles. And what's interesting is we're very big, but Andromeda, which I'll show you a picture of, is 152,000 light years. So when you look at the magnitude, you don't see anything change. I've seen one picture of Crab Nebula, which looks like a bowl of spaghetti with different colors. And a guy took a picture over 20 years and he did a time lapse of it. And you can kind of see it expanding. But over 20 years, it's like you're watching your hand. It's like you're watching your hand just move from here to there. That's Andromeda. So 152,000 light years. It's 3 degrees wide. You know, when we're looking at the sky. You know, 360 degrees. So it's very big, but it is very diffuse, and it's 2.5 million light years away. So the light we see is 2.5 million years old.
Does your photo system put the information there?
No.
You have to add that in?
I added that. I'll show you in this planetarium program what I can use. Because there are a number of things, pieces of software, planetarium programs, and iPad programs for finding stars and things like that. The reason I show all this is that all these numbers, turn that off, is that we're tracking stars. What happens, the ability, I'm doing time exposures that are as long as 40 hours long. Being as there's only 5 hours to 8 hours of time available, and it's a moving target, you've got to be able to track that star. And that's how Hubble gets all its great pictures. It has an amazing system of tracking. It uses gyros to move and keep the star centered. And so an arc minute, which is how we measure things in arc seconds, we're down in arc seconds tracking half an arc. About half an arc second is what I track at, so 1/72,000th of a degree, and I'm doing that with commercial off-the-shelf and volunteered software. The program I use to control my telescope, the guy doesn't ask for money, so I send him some every so often. He's in Germany. Again, let's see, I took moon is half degree wide, Andromeda's 3 degrees wide. My camera can resolve down to 1.4 arc seconds. So, and we're talking pixel size of 2.9 arc seconds, or excuse me, microns. So we all know microns are 1,000th of a millimeter. So we're talking little numbers. The wind blowing over 5 miles an hour, I can't shoot it. If you put it on your deck and you walk on your deck, you're not going to get anything. I sit on a concrete patio, and I can track it quarter pixel to a half a pixel for the entire night. And it's math intensive, so here's my first warning. If you don't like math, this is not a good hobby to get into, because the knowledge of it is spread all over everybody's. It's like everything else on the internet. It's spread over everybody else's opinions and experiences. And some's good, some's bad, some's unintelligible. I have a friend who's very good at math down in North Carolina. When I get really bound up on trying to figure this stuff out, he and I confer. For the first year I was doing this, we probably had about 90 hours of talking to each other. At times, sometimes 4 hours at a time. We're down to talking to each other about 5 minutes a week now. And you don't have to get into this whole hog. If you've got a camera and you've got a tripod, you can do it. Somebody just showed me there are apps for the iPhone and other phones that you can, if you get a tripod in your iPhone, it'll shoot the Milky Way. You got to point in the right direction, but it'll take all the pictures and it'll stack them together. And I'll talk about stacking in a second and what that all means. You can go along. I'll show you something I'm getting ready to do, but I shot 15 millimeter lens. And that way you can see the Milky Way, or you can just sit there and everybody sees the circle of stars tracing around Polaris, the North Star.
1.5 millimeter?
1.5. Because yeah, you're looking at about 110 degrees width, and I put well, in fact, right here. This is downloadable, right? Ultimately, will they be able to download the PDF that I gave you?
The PDF or the?
No, the PDF is this.
Oh.
And if they do,
I can download the PowerPoint to them.
well, you can give them the PDF. Well, anyways, I have a PDF. We can get it to you one way or another.
Oh, is that what those were? I went
Yes.
PDF short and long.
Yeah, those are PDFs.
Okay.
But anyways, these are links. This is actually very good for what I'm talking about, which is it's on Opcorp, who sells telescope stuff. And it walks through. You start with your smartphone. Then you use your digital SLR on a tripod. Then you get a specific equatorial mount that'll track with the stars, but is unguided. And then you start spending money on deep sky astrophotography. And that's when they really like you over at Opcorp.
So yes, I will put that in our Google Drive for a handout, and then I'll just send it out.
Yeah.
Can I include the PowerPoint as well?
That's what, yeah, well, the PowerPoint's exactly the same thing. It's just run to PDF. I took this at Blackwater about a week ago on Wednesday night. It's the first time I've done it in years and years. Went with a friend to see what we could see. Best I can tell, everything at the bottom that's yellow is Pax River. I was doing my best on Google Earth to determine that. And I can talk to you about how I knew when to get there, what angle the Milky Way would be, and how I got that. And what I've showed in here also is a blow up that shows at 30 seconds, you'll see that the stars are smeared. Smeared. See how they are oblong? Yeah. That's because they're moving. Excuse me, the Earth is moving, and that's why I'm going to talk. How do you do a time exposure over 40 hours? Step 2, you move to a motorized mount. This is a mount that I just bought for my camera, and I'm going to try and do it with the camera because it was so on sale. It used to be about $600. It's on sale. It was on sale for $299 by Explore Scientific, and I can hook my computer to it. It will go automatically to whatever place I tell it to go to. It will find it, and then it can start shooting. I'm going to try it with telephoto lens too. But when you start doing that and you start moving with the stars, yes, I know the Earth is moving, but when you go move with the stars, essentially it's calibrated to that rate. Really pretty nicely. You can probably do 30 seconds and your stars will not smear. To keep your stars from smearing, you're going to have to start doing what's called guiding and adding yet another scope, which then tracks the star. The software, the scope, your computer, and the software target a specific star, and it'll start sending impulses to this to keep everything centered. And again, I'm going to get more into that in a second. I told you I was going to show you what hooked me. I had a camera, I had a tripod, I had a 100 to 400 millimeter lens, so I went after the Orion Nebula. And this is my very first picture. You'll see a lot of blue halos over that. That's because the stars are completely blown out, overexposed. But down to the left is the Orion Nebula, and all of a sudden I can see the colors. I said, that is really something. And up here, you can see the Flame Nebula, but you can't really see any detail of the Horsehead Nebula just to the right of it. But let me see if I've got, oops, I'm going to go back a second, give you whiplash. That's the Orion Nebula that was down in the lower left. And that's the Horsehead Nebula and the Flame Nebula that you see here. So Orion, Horsehead, and Flame. I guess it's because I gotta get close to there. So what happens is you start to get intrigued by this, and you want sharper, you want more light, you want to get a little bit closer. So what do you have to do? You got to get yourself a dedicated astrophotography camera. And dedicated astrophotography camera is dedicated because it's a very high sensitivity camera, and it has what's called a Peltier cooler on it. It's a solid state chip that draws the heat off the sensor and reduces the amount of noise. You saw the gravelly sort of you see the gravelly sort of look. I don't know if you guys can see it on your computers, but that gravelly look is just electronic noise from the sensor. And it reduces that by a pretty significant amount. Let's go back again, I'm sorry. So anyways, you get an astrophotography camera. Now you've got to get a dedicated computer for remote control. You've got to add the guide scope so that you can do long exposures. Then I added a focusing motor so I could get it to do automatic sharp focus, a filter wheel, because I'm going to tell you why I use filters, a field rotator so I can tell it I don't want to chop off part of the Horsehead Nebula. I want to rotate the camera automatically to the orientation that the Horsehead Nebula is in. And then step 10, if you have no self-control, is you start doing this again, and you go from what for me right now is $6,000, and by the time you get down to here, it's maybe $25,000, or for some people, $80,000. I'm not bit that good.
So what are the brands of these astrophotography cameras? So these are Hasselblads?
No. So
they're
they're all Chinese.
all Chinese.
ZWO is one of the major ones. There's another one I can't think of the name right now. And then there's some older, more extravagant ones, but none of them made in the United States. So you go to the astrophotography sites, stores, and I have some listed at the end. Well, I have one, High Point Scientific, which is very good, and they've got a gazillion of everything. And you start reading the forums, and I've got the forum that I use, and and again, I'm sorry, I didn't repeat the question. The question was, where do the cameras come from, and where do you find them?
You find them on Amazon?
You can, but they aren't the good ones. So, about 2 years later, here's what my rig looks like now. And I've put labels on everything so I don't have to try to explain it all. You can see it's a rat's nest of wires. If you're really type A, you'll try to custom make wires that all are nice, conformal, and everything like that. Otherwise, it's just a big search to get everything to fit between the astrophotography stores and Amazon and USB cables. Let's see, what was the other thing I was going to show you on here? Oh, so I don't show the tripods. The tripods here, this is the mount area where Ioptron Gem 45. What I do is this whole scope comes off a bracket, and it sits on the dining, or not the dining room table, kitchen table. And then I unbolt the mount. No, excuse me, that's about 30 pounds. The scope and all of this equipment, long equipment on the scope, is 30 pounds. The mount is about 15 pounds. The tripod's about another 15 pounds. And I break those three things apart. It takes me about 10 minutes to break them apart, carry them outside, and put them back together. And then make sure I got them all tight. Because if you don't get them tight, remember, you're working at a half pixel and a half millimeter. So, or excuse me, 1/7200th of a degree. And I just did some things to show progress. And again, it's subtle here, but this is, once I got initially into it, the left 2019 is very good detail of Orion. But if you'll look, I was getting longer exposure. You see a lot more of this brown cloud detail there as I change cameras. And another example, and this is blown up. This is probably takes up about 1/30th of the frame, but I can blow it up this big. And that's a sunflower galaxy. And I think it's one of the prettiest. And 400 billion stars, 98,000 light years across. Then I took the Iris Nebula, and the Iris is another type of nebula, but it's reflected, it's not emissive. So all the light comes from this star right in the center, coming down this tunnel, and you start to see all these dark clouds of, I'm not sure what they're made out of, but they're thick enough that they don't get irradiated by this. Well, excuse me, they're not hydrogen, so they don't get radiation, or excuse me, the star, and they don't glow red. So they just block out all the other stars behind it. As opposed to Elephant's Trunk Nebula, this is an emissive nebula, and it emits various colors. And this is what I'll talk about in terms of false colors, with the orange is hydrogen, blue is oxygen, and this darker brown is probably sulfur.
So what are your filters doing then?
I'm going to get into that. What are my filters doing? I'm going to get into that. I do 4 to 45 hours. I accomplish it by stacking photos. So how do you do 5 hours of time exposure? Everybody that has an iPhone, if you've ever taken a picture using their night mode, it takes a picture and you watch it. It's taking like 6 or 8 pictures, and it's taking a very low exposure, and then it's stacking it one on top of another. If we took old negatives and they were underexposed and we stacked all the negatives, you'd start to build that density. And so 1 to 5 minute exposures is what I take. And if you do 5 minute exposures, 5 minute exposures, 12 of them will give you an hour's worth of time exposure. Plane solving. This is what I call magic, because how do you find the star? The telescope will take you to approximately where the star is, but it's not going to be necessarily in the center because things aren't calibrated. The camera takes a picture and then it goes and grabs off the internet pictures with registered information on it, and it figures out, rotates it, gets it right, matches it, and says, oh, I'm here, and it moves the scope enough to center the star. And it'll do that anywhere. It'll do that anywhere around you.
That's pretty amazing.
And it does it over and over and over and over again. So if I do 40 hours, 45 hours, that's probably about 9 days. Over 9 days, it gets it exactly in the same position every night, and it tracks it that night. And then guiding, the two things that are going to give you sharpness are focus and really tight guiding, because if the star's moving around, it's going to be bigger. How do we find them? There's a program called Stellarium. It's freeware. There are other ones, but I use Stellarium. And it's just a planetarium program. You can get it for PC, Mac, Linux. And once you load it, if you put your mouse over on the left side, you can search for anything, and it'll put a crosshatch on there, and then you can go up here and say, I want to see it closer. And when it shows it closer, you were asking about information. You can tell it to provide all the information for that thing you're looking for. This is the Heart Nebula. And because I've set it up with the parameters for my camera, it shows what the frame will capture on relative to that, even to if I rotate it so I can get the orientation better. And that way I can send this off to my control program. I won't get into that in depth, but it has a search program, and I like Stellarium better. But what's interesting is the information all these people have provided. I want you to look at this graph. This tells you what the altitude is over time. You know, how high is it in the sky? It shows where the horizon is, and it shows when it's light, when it's dark, when you can. So essentially, when and where you can see it. So when you go to look at it, you know you're going to fill the evening with that star, or it's going to go into. And when you wake up the next morning, you're going to find the scope pointing at the ground because it followed it into the ground. So then, Stellarium, I just send it over Andromeda as the example here, and I can tell the program how to orient my sensor, and then again I get a blown up star for that. Excuse me, I get a blown up graph for that, and I can see sunset, twilight in those bands, and once it is in the black, it's an astronomical twilight. And I can set the sequence of how the camera's going to shoot, what filters it's going to use, how long it's going to do it, how often it auto refocuses, because as the temperature changes, the scope gets longer and shorter, changes the focus. So if it changes 2 degrees, I tell it to refocus. And if you're watching the star, your scope, I can't explain this very well, but you're going to reach the limits of where your scope runs into and stops. And then what your scope literally has to do is it does one of these. It does what's called a meridian flip. So that it can rotate on the other side, because it rotated as far physically as it can go. And that's one of the hardest things, because sometimes you just find it and it's, again, pointing at the ground, looking very broken. Then when I'm tracking it, this just gives me all the information I need. This is the guiding I was telling you about, how it's tracking the star. This is telling me focus over on the left upper corner. And this is following how well my focus is doing in the upper right-hand corner. You'll see a light. I can select a light view, a view of what I'm shooting to make sure I'm really shooting it. And this shows progress in the lower right-hand corner. Now, with this program, what happens is I've got it down to where if I start at 9:30, I'm usually happy that things are running the way they should by 10 o'clock. And I can go to bed. I can shoot 3 targets. It'll automatically switch between targets, autofocus on them. start shooting, go through its sequence, and then go to the next target. And that's a free program, and it runs on a PC. Oh, and I do it from inside my house via Wi-Fi remote, so I never get cold. Photo factors, I've sort of talked about it. You know, as you get addicted to this, you want sharper, you want APO optics, which gets rid of chromatic aberration. If you've ever seen on bright pictures of cheap lenses, you'll see purple ring around the light edges of things, chromatic aberration. A focus motor is great because if you've ever owned a telescope and you're trying to focus it with your hand, it's shaking while you're doing it. If you can keep your hands off the telescope, that's nice. Software-driven autofocus, instead of you saying it's in focus, it actually looks at how wide the star is and finds the smallest star. Mount, this is where one of the biggest things starts to happen. I have a mount that costs $2,000. I have a friend that has a mount that costs $18,000. It's more precise. He can be in better winds, but do I get that much better picture by tripling the price of my mount? No, it's not 3 times as heavy. Oops. And then you just got to worry about underexposure, overexposure. There are post-processing software that can subtract out the sensor noise that I was showing you, the salt and pepper noise. And if you've got dust on the sensor or things like that, that will show up in your picture, but you can take a picture with a white light at the end of the scope and it will subtract out all the optical aberrations. So, as I said, it gets complicated. And post-processing, I've got to stack it, I've got to remove the noise, and then I've got to do the color adjustment.
So how long does it take for one picture?
I do one picture is anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. Oh, you're talking about the finished picture?
Yeah.
Anywhere from 30 minutes to 5 hours. Depends on how much patience I've got. I wanted to go into this because people ask me enough questions about it. I showed you originally on the right, Rosette Nebula. Well, that's taken in narrowband. That's 3 discrete frequencies. If you look at it with a normal color camera, a DSLR or a color astro camera, it's just going to look red and you're going to see details. But you can notice on the right that you can start to see a lot more of the finer details of the nebula clouds and things like that. And so very quickly, broadband is white light, so red, green, blue at its simplest, and it goes from about 350 to about 700 nanometers. So that includes, the sensor will pick up city lights, the lights from your living room, the moon. If it's not really pure skies and all that's reflecting off really dusty, when the Canadian dust smoke came across, pretty much put me out of business. Not even narrowband you can see it. Narrowband looks where these spikes are showing. Hydrogen Bravo, oxygen 3, hydrogen alpha, and sulfur 2. And if there is contaminating light out there, as shown by these yellow spikes, it won't show up on your picture because it won't get through the filter. It excludes all of those. So I do most of my stuff in narrowband just because.
So narrowband is a filter?
Narrowband is each 3 filters.
Okay.
You shoot one filter 5 minutes, another filter 5 minutes, and another filter 5 minutes, and you rotate through those all night. You just keep rotating through and taking lots of pictures. And so on some nights, well, let's see, so an hour, 12, I'm usually doing about 20, 25, 30 red, greens, S, H, and O, sulfur, hydrogen, and oxygen. Results from the backyard. as of this. Had to get the moon. Moon's easy. A lot of people will take multiple shots and do all kinds of things. It's really bright. I just shot the moon.
So I'm still stuck on the filters. Why can't you stack the filters?
Because, see, you're driving me into nerd stuff. The issue is, we also, all our rendering systems for pictures are red, green, and blue. So you have to have a discrete thing to put in the red channel, a discrete frequency to put in the blue channel, and a discrete frequency to put in the green channel. So, anyways, moon's always cool to look at to me, and especially I like half moons because you see the detail of the Terminator one. Hold on. There we go. I showed you Rosette again. A lot of detail there, but to me it's just not as interesting as the other one. But this was the title slide, and this is the Whirlpool Galaxy, the interaction of two galaxies together. Andromeda's a galaxy, Milky Way's a galaxy. All usually what they're now saying around supermassive black holes that are causing this sort of what we call the Coriolis effect with water going down the toilet. Horsehead Nebula. This one's fascinating to me because it does look like a horse head, and if you look at the Hubble, there's a Hubble and there's some infrared pictures of this, and you see the color of the horse head. And the horse head's a big cloud the shape of a horse head that blocks out all the light from behind it. So that's not a hole. It's actually it's a backlit cloud. This comet came through in March, I think, of this year. And they don't give them very interesting names. They don't name them after people all that much. And it's a whole different kind of photography. It was my first try. And what's interesting about it is the star's this is moving in a completely different direction and a different speed from the stars. So you've got to shoot it, separate it, and put it all back together to get it where the stars aren't moving. And this is sharp too. The comet is sharp. The Pinwheel Galaxy. This one's very interesting. One of the first I shot, and this is one of my older ones. You can see it's not quite as fine-grained as the new one. What was interesting, I think, in late spring, they said that there had been a supernova in M101 Pinwheel Galaxy. So I went out there, and if you compare this picture, you can see this bright spot. Well, I wish I could point to it for you, but that's a supernova right there, and it was not here. And that was spotted by an amateur, it turns out. And again, this is 21 million years ago. So that supernova happened 21 million years ago. Narrowband examples. I always show this one. This one's hard to get. It's 25 degrees above the horizon, just above my roof of my house. So I see it for about 3 hours. And it's in the Eagle Nebula. And has everybody heard of the Pillars of Creation? Pillars of Creation was made famous by the Hubble. That was one of the first major famous pictures by Hubble because they were saying this is all a star nursery in this left-hand pillar. And so this is what billions of dollars will do for you. And that's what $6,500 will do for you. Helix Nebula explosion a long time ago. The expanding gases. I think it's from the star in dead center, and the oxygen, hydrogen, and sulfur are all irradiated by the radiation, and then they emit these colors. Lagoon Nebula, again, oxygen is blue, the yellow, again, this is false color. I put sulfur in the red channel, hydrogen in the green channel, and the blue channel is oxygen. And it's what gives you this kind of detail. And that was when you used to see, they tell you this is a Hubble palette or a false color palette. That's what I'm using. And I like this one. This is Thor's helmet. And again, that one's about 25 degrees. I see that for about 2 hours. And so just trying to get the detail out of that. But you can see the stars are relatively round, so we're tracking pretty well on it. And you can see detail on this little bubble in the middle. And this is the interior of the Heart Nebula. I showed you the Heart Nebula in that one stellarium frame of how I was going to target it. But this just shows you, it's almost surreal. I have programs that remove all the stars, and when you remove the stars, it just looks like artwork. I put some web resources, boy, I'm way ahead of my schedule here. Web resources, Cloudy Nights talks about, is where I get used gear, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And everybody's just talking about, how do you do this? I've got this. Is this a good piece of equipment? I have no earthly idea what I just bought. You know, that sort of thing. They have a lot of used gear. The nice thing about this hobby, if you buy reasonable gear and you don't like it, you can put it back on for sale. And all the mistakes I made in the early part of this hobby, I sold on Cloudy Nights used gear and probably lost 10 to 30% on it. So it's sort of like renting your gear. Astrobin, and I'll show a slide of that, but that's where everybody that shoots, amateur shoots, puts it on Astrobin, and you do it by people, it gets likes, you can look things up. And so when I'm looking for targets, sometimes I will just say, what is everybody shooting that I haven't shot? I've shot about 90 targets. And I get it from there. And it's got technical forums, but I don't find them to be as useful as Cloudy Nights. And High Point Scientific, I really like them. They're up in New Jersey. So when New Jersey, right on the border of New Jersey or New York. And when you order stuff, it's usually there within a day if they have it in stock. If you don't know something's working right, I bought something from them and I worked with them for a month to get it returned and prove it didn't work. But they all are astrophotographers, so the support staff knows their business. This is what Astrobin looks like. I put a QR code. I saw somebody with an iPhone there. If you take a picture of that QR code, that'll take you to, this is actually my Astrobin site, and these are all pictures I've taken, and there's 60 more down there. But you can just go hunt through that and see all kinds of things. And people rent time on telescopes all over the world. You can do that. There are setups where you rent time over the internet and you shoot with big telescopes, and then you pursue your processing skills at home, and you don't even invest in the telescope. So it's time sharing without all the disadvantages of time sharing. What's possible? I found this on Astrobin. This is amazing to me because everybody has seen the ISS go, remember, it goes around at 90, in 90 minutes, it circles the Earth. So it whizzes across, if you're watching, it goes across in about 30 seconds or so. So how he initially acquired the target, how he got it to track the target and get this resolution, but he did. Unless he's pulling our leg and it's all CGI. And then I've got some backup. This is the Flying Bat Nebula, the red stuff, with the Squid Nebula in the middle of it. I want to talk about scopes if people get interested. Things are starting to come out. They started coming out about 2 or 3 years ago. The scope on the right started out at about $3,500 and would give you an okay picture. Well, ZWO and a company called Dwarf, ZWO is the black scope, dwarf is the left scope. These are $400 to $500 scopes, and they sit on your tripod. They have the built-in software. You can run them from your iPad. They'll go find it. They'll do everything my scope does. They'll find it. They'll center it. They'll take pictures. They'll autofocus the scope, but it's very small aperture, so not a lot of light gathering, and especially that one. But you know, I don't know anybody that's tried one yet. I've been very curious to try one because I'm getting ready to go to New Zealand. Something like that would be really cool in New Zealand, and it's about that big.
Wow.
Huh.
And the ZWO is about that big. But buyer beware, you get what you pay for. There is a law there. The first several $1,000s of expenditure, if you do it right, you see amazing changes. But you don't see proportional changes as you start going past where I am, in my opinion. Serious equipment. There's a 14-inch astrograph, specifically meant so that there's no aberrations. So 14-inch aperture, reflector telescope. You can see it's in a home-built observatory with a roll-off roof and probably wired with network cable back to the house and runs it from the house completely remotely. Here's really serious. This guy obviously rolls it out from the garage right here and then jacks it up. I've seen one of these up in New York. And, you know, I don't know how you accept shipping of this thing. And if you're really well heeled, I came across this plain wave 1 meter scope. It's a 1 meter aperture. And for $575,000, it can be yours. And I'm not sure what computer controls that includes. I think that's mostly just the mount and the scope.
It does not qualify for free shipping.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and that's it. I mean, I rolled through this with a half hour to spare. Gentlemen, ladies, do I have any questions? I sort of rolled through it quickly because there's just all sorts of nuanced.
So what are the programs you use for your stacking and?
Repeat the question.
It's one of the questions that are used for stacking and processing photographs. There's some freeware which I started with. I should have come prepared for that. I'll add to this before you post it. I'll send it to you and have some suggestions for software. Because there's stuff that does the stacking, there's stuff, and you tell us, here are my light frames, these are the ones with the stars on it. Here's my dark frames. The dark frames are taken where you shoot the exact same amount of time with a cap on the camera, and all it looks is how much noise pattern. And then there's what's called a flat. And a flat has a uniform white source on it. Sometimes you can use a T-shirt for that during the daytime. And all it's doing is it's taking a picture of all of the dust donuts and things like that. And these programs will ask you for each of those, and they'll calibrate by subtracting all the bad stuff out, and then they will stack one on top of the other and give you a picture. But then once you do that, it still looks like a black picture with about 5 stars in it. You've got to stretch it. It's called stretching, and there are. I've got to get the name from. There are a bunch of them. I use one called Pix Insight, written by who writes it? This guy is up in Europe somewhere, and it's about $250 for the license, but it's a lifetime license, and it does everything it will. I don't even know. It's sort of like Photoshop. I know about 10% of what it does. I use what I need. Let's see, what other software? Nina is what I use. Nighttime imaging. God, what else? I can't remember what Nina stands for, but and that's freeware. And to me, it's extraordinary software. I've been using it for 3 years. Before that, I was using something called Astrophotography tool, APT, and it just was too hard. The interface was bad. You didn't see what you were doing, things like that. I know all the acronyms, SGP. There's one called SGP, and I don't like the interface because you end up with what I call a dirty desktop. They do everything instead of plastering the windows in a nice matrix. You'll end up with stuff all stacked like this. Now you've got to go through your desktop, finding that your focus is here, your exposure times here, your target sequence is here, things like that. And then I use Photoshop to try to enhance the colors. Because what you'll see with things like this is it's still relatively dim, so you're brightening it. You're using color saturation to bring these out. You're using shadows. There's just a lot of things. And artistic license is completely allowed here because it's false color. You know, it's a lot more interesting that way. And again, if you didn't do narrowband, you just don't see what looks like all these mountains and clouds.
So I have the big question here.
Okay.
Does your wife go on a cruise while you're busy doing?
No, because I haven't been doing much because it's been cloudy pretty much all year. It's been really pretty bad. I probably shot about 15 times this year. I set up when the sun starts to go down. I didn't talk about it, but you got to pull a line too. And Nina has a program which will take the camera and point it, and then it tells you to rotate it 90 degrees. And it takes another picture, and then it calculates how far off you are. You use your azimuth, left to right controls to move that, and your altitude to get it right until it's centered. So I do all that. I see if it's all working. She goes to bed. If I'm not obsessing over this, I go to bed. I get up at 9 o'clock, or 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and go out and I look, and the camera's reset itself, and it's just sitting there waiting to be put away. So, and then I disappear upstairs for half a day sometimes if it's really interesting. That was what happened the first couple of years. And I didn't repeat the question. What is my wife? The answer, this is a question. The answer was a question of what does my wife do? Take a cruise. But when I'm all done with it, if I decide to get rid of it, I get $4,000 for everything. If I sold it turnkey. So not bad for 5-year investment. Much better than a car or a boat. Other questions?
How about you folks on Zoom? Any questions? Someone click it.
He's muted. I see him. Can you unmute?
No?
Bill Curry?
Yeah. Or Sweeney.
Oh,
Mr. Sweeney?
Bill Sweeney, are you wanting to?
I saw your lips move, but I didn't hear anything.
Oh, you're muted, that's why.
Press your space bar.
Can you unmute all?
I don't think so.
You should be able to in Zoom.
Well, we're not Zoom.
Oh, what is this?
This is Zoom room.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
There we go.
unmute. So are there, like radio operators, they can kind of talk to each other in real time? There are any groups where you can say, I'm shooting, nebula,
Okay, question is this, are there collaborations where a group of astrophotographers all go after the same thing and collaborate to share their photos? Yes.
how's that happen?
They just do it over the internet, via chat.
So it's not actually talking.
You don't need to, because you can just chat and say, it's all going to be oriented the same, no matter where they live. One person could be, as long as they're all Northern Hemisphere, one could be in Europe, one could be in America, one could be in Japan. And they just send their pictures and they accumulate them all together. The software that stacks them will auto-rotate them or line them all up. And even the program that I showed you here Astrobin.
Something's happened.
Oh, yeah, go back to the show. We're having technical difficulties. The screen,
No, well,
is the mouse stop working?
mouse is working. Something happened that the,
Okay. Right there. There we go. Let's see if I can go backwards
no,
now.
no, you did that. No. We shouldn't have to press.
When I get a picture like this in Astrobin, it will automatically solve this, and it'll identify every star on here. All the big ones.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, automatically, over the internet. Wow. So the technology is really rather astounding. And while I've spent $6,500, you don't need a rotator. The scope was about $1,000. The used 115 millimeter. The mount was about $2,200 new. Computer I had is an old Mac, which I repurposed as a PC because the software doesn't run on Mac. And then I had focus motors for about $200. And then you start getting down yourself. It's like a boat. But those are the big things. So maybe $3,000 to $4,000 to, but you want to get a really good mount. I had a $700 mount, and it just was not consistent. And most of my pictures were unusable.
So anyone on Zoom, and we've unmuted you so you can ask questions.
No, they're muted back again.
They are?
Yeah, they got the little mute sign back up front of them.
I had
Because you did have it off.
We think that we got a little power surge here,
Yeah,
so.
Mr. Curry then show any sort of mute.
There,
You know what? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there. I hear you.
Yeah.
Mr. Sweeney is still muted.
So I put two questions in the chat. The first is, are any of the local photography clubs doing any work with astrophotography? And the second question, do you take tag-alongs when you go out into the field?
I would take tag-alongs to go back to Blackwater. Happy to just bring your DEET and long pants. I didn't prepare. I was out there with shorts, being eaten alive. I'd be more than happy to invite somebody over to see the setup. But I shoot from the back of the house, and during the winter it can start at 6:30 because it's dark. In the summer it starts at about 10 o'clock at night. I'll entertain anything if people are interested. I was very fortunate in that I had a couple of friends that helped answer questions, and if we didn't know the answer, we painfully all researched it and found the answer together.
So Bill, you can reach out to him, to Jim, through the website. On his course page, there's a little button to email him.
And somebody asked me early on, about Blackwater, and I'm going to go out there again and give it another try. Especially, I've got this $300 mount, which will now follow the sky, and maybe I can get better exposures, and maybe I can shoot. The problem is I'm shooting at 115 millimeter aperture, which is about a meter worth of length of scope. So you're really pinpointing things. I've seen some interesting pictures, haven't done this for 4 years, where you do 100 millimeters or 200 millimeters, and you get a bunch of the different galaxies and all in the same picture. It's sort of like we've seen the Hubble and they showed the amazing picture with all the different galaxies in one picture rather than centering on one. So that's sort of my next experiment. I'm getting tired of sitting at my computer anyways. Bill Sweeney? Mr. Sweeney, did you have a question?
No, you've overwhelmed me.
Well, my wife, I learned a long time never to try to teach my wife anything, so it just ended up in acrimony. But if there's anything anybody wants me to sort of back up or simplify or just talk about, I mean, the real question is if you were going to do it, somebody you can look up. I'm going to list some software. I think that's a great suggestion because somebody just told me about one that you can get a frame. Excuse me, you get the little frame for your phone, you put it on a tripod, and you hit the button, and it will shoot and stack from the iPhone.
Oh, that's cool.
Now, you're not going to get very close, but it's good for the Milky Way.
So what will you be sending me that I'll forward to everybody in our?
What I can do is I can just add it on PDF if you want and put some hot links in there for software places.
Will the links work in a PDF?
Yes, they should.
Okay.
They should. If they don't, you know who to complain to.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
I have a Fuji crop sensor camera, quite a few lenses. And does it matter if you're shooting crop versus full frame?
It's just a smaller. It makes a smaller image. You know how you got is crop sensor? It's an APS-C probably, or is it a
Yes.
All right.
APC.
Okay, APS-C. The Astro cameras all come in that. Mine's a 1-inch sensor, actually. Everything you've seen is off a 1-inch sensor on a 115 millimeter scope. So if you go full frame on 100 millimeter, you're going to get really wide. If you do APS-C, you're going to get wide. If you go 1 inch on the same millimeters, it'll just get picture because you're just using the smaller part of the image circle.
Just from listening to you, it sounds like I have to invest a fair amount of money to really pursue this hobby to any degree.
Well, as I said, the thing I would do, what kind of tripod do you have right now?
Oh boy, it's a $500-600. I use it for waterfowl more than anything else, and I'm a wannabe birder.
Well, I gave up on birds. I met people that were better at it than me, so I'm doing this. But you know, a Benro, I've got Manfrottos. I shot the Milky Way with Manfrottos. I shot that really terrible picture of Orion and Flame Nebula with the Manfrotto. That's sort of the thing to do is you go out there and go to about 200 millimeters, point at Orion. Orion's the easiest. I've always been terrible at seeing constellations. Orion is so easy because of the belt and the bow and everything else. It's off to the southeast. Is it rising now? I think it's rising a little bit later. But you shoot in there. And the nice thing about DSLR is it mirrorless or is it a mirrored camera?
Digital. Yes. Digital.
Okay, it's digital. Does it have a mirror or is it without a mirror?
Mirror.
Okay. Does it have a live mode function in it? Live, Live.
I don't know.
Like when you shoot video, that's a live mode. And so instead of using the mirror, it flips the mirror up, you hit live mode, and now you can see what you're looking at through the lens on your back screen. Most everything.
Oh, yeah. It does have the live mode, yes.
And then what you do is you just focus from there. You just keep the mirror flipped up and you use all that and just practice focusing and tracking. I put in there was a 500 rule, which is 500 divided by the focal length of your lens will give you the approximate time exposure time that you can do. So for 15 millimeter and 500, that's roughly 30 seconds. But if you want pointy stars, you divide that by 4. So 500 divided by 4, 250, 125 divided by, will give you the time, 7.5 seconds if I wanted pointy stars. Now I got to start stacking because I'm not getting enough light.
Gotcha.
So
And
I'd start easy, and feel free to send me an email, or I've called people back and said the only way you could succeed at this and not get completely frustrated is having people to talk to and go. The guy I talked to, I used to work with, and he's got a PhD in electrical engineering, and we're not beyond saying, did you plug it in? Did you turn it on? There are no embarrassing questions in this business.
And the reason you don't use anything more than a 150 or 200 lens is when you start getting into 4 and 6, so you don't have enough light.
You're going to be losing light. Yeah, it's that, and unless you've got them on a super mount, you're going to be hand focusing as the focus ring. The autofocus doesn't tend to work on stars.
Okay.
So when I was focusing on the Milky Way, I have a Canon R5, and I press the magnification button, and it goes to 5x. And if you see just a black screen, I had set it for, well, it was live view. I work the focus, and all of a sudden you see stars. You're in focus. Very, very little movement to get them in focus. So I think it just gets too hard, and that's why you got to go to a dedicated scope. That's why I went to a 115 millimeter scope. Now, the other thing you can do, it's just, you've got to sort of do a calculated risk issue of, you can get a non-APO scope. You can get a 120 millimeter non-APO scope for 250. You might have chromatic aberration, purple colors around the star, because it's not as precise a lens, but it's still, you could do it for less than 2,000, but it's about a couple of $1,000 episode. And how much money you're going to lose at trading in when you say this isn't good enough, I need that $2,200 scope. And I've got a friend who keeps trying to sell me his astrophysics scope that he's not using anymore, and that's about a $8,000 scope. And that was something I forgot to mention, is I think there's sort of an asymptote for quality versus price. When you're down at $700, every little improvement looks really good. You get to about 4,000, the curve starts going over like this, and past 6,000, if I go to $12,000 worth of gear, just upgrading the gear, am I going to get a 10, 15% difference? People, and I'm thrilled with what I get, and I get a lot of good reviews just from my friends saying that's pretty neat, and it's good enough for me. It's got to be a limit.
Right. Always happy, never satisfied.
Yeah, exactly. I sort of think I know when to stop, although I just bought this other telescope. But I got it for this mount, I got it for $299. If this hypothesis doesn't work out, I'll sell it on cloudy nights for $250. Any other questions?
Good question.
I got one of the Zoom guys who have. We answered both your questions, Mr. Sweeney. Who oh,
Bill Curry. Yeah, too.
he did.
Yeah.
He did the two. Okay. We're good.
I think at some point you said you shot 90% of the available targets.
No, I shot 90 targets.
90 targets. Is there a target that's on the top of your bucket list?
Not worth putting all this in a car and going to West Virginia.
Really?
No.
That's not that far.
A weekend in a B&B?
Oh, no, the B&Bs are nowhere near where you gotta go to be dark. I have a friend, Almost Heaven Star Party, AHSP, which is up in the darkest part there. Last time my friend went last year, having planned on it for 4 months, when he got there, out of 5 nights, it rained 4.
Oh. Jeez.
and they're intense. And so that's more, and here's the other thing you gotta think about is I'm running off an extension cord that goes to 12 volt power supply things. They don't like your car anywhere near that, so you gotta run a long cord where you've gotta have good batteries.
Or you're
So-
not getting out of there.
Some people have boat batteries. Some people have, they're all what do you call them? The heavy duty batteries. Some have lithium ion batteries. I'm afraid of lithium. When a lithium ion battery gets to a certain size, I don't know who made it. I think I'm carrying a stick of dynamite. So I limit myself to ones about this big and my iPhone. So I use a 12 volt battery, but the issue is you got to fold all this stuff up. People have asked me if I were to go back and look at let's see. Is that,
Hey. Try now.
yeah, here we go. I'm gonna go back to the scope real quick. There. If you look at the scope, all the big white thing on the bottom, the big scope, white thing. I'm, of course, sort of making fun of myself here. The guide scope is on top. You can see a little, very tiny. We were talking about sensor size. That's like 1/1/3. It's a tiny thing, but it just has to focus on stars to track. The red camera at the bottom is the cooled camera, and that is a 1-inch sensor. And then you see, let's see, that's the filter wheel to rotate the red, green, and blue when I'm taking red, green, and blue broadband, or the narrowband filters. I also now have on that another thing about that same shape, which is the rotator. Then I've got spacers because it has to be 55 millimeters from the back of this field flattener. There's another thing you could buy, a field flattener, because unless you get an APO 4-lens setup, as it gets to the edge, the stars start to go oblong on the edges. And so the flattener corrects them all down here. But the number of times I was ordering and not getting, because I misordered the wrong spacers. Here's some. I bought this used, buyer beware again. I got it home, guy said it was just fine, had it all set up, had my first camera on here, not much anything very complicated. And right at this joint above this red focus motor down here, the whole back end of the scope fell off on the ground. Luckily,
On the cement.
it didn't. No. This was in the house, so it fell on the wood floor. But that was terrible. So I figured out a way to fix that, and I thought I had it fixed until about a year ago when it fell. But luckily, it just dropped into a chair. At which time I then tapped holes and figured out how to permanently make it work. But you take all this stuff apart. The tolerances and what you're trying to shoot, I'm afraid to take any of this apart. Somebody says, well, take this off, take all the camera stuff and put it on the little scope and shoot in the little scope. That'll give me a wider field. I'm not doing that, because when I try to put it back on here, then I've got another month's work of recalibrating it, fixing it, things like that. And there's dedication and I got other things to do. So I've been happy with this. You've seen people, I showed you the big scopes. I've seen people that have a huge mount and they have 3 80mm scopes with 3 cameras. Each camera has a different filter on it so that they can save time by shooting 3 cameras at a time. Instead of waiting 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, they shoot all three colors in five minutes. But now that thing's this wide, it's ungainly. You got to fold all this. You got to fold up your scope if you're going to put it in the, or your tripod if you're going to put it in the car. Now when you get it back, you got to make sure everything's really tight, nothing's rattling, because 1/7200th of a degree shake, and the picture's out of focus. So I stick, long answer to say, I just stick to, what works, where it works, and I'm just looking for some new targets now. Okay? Wow.
One other question.
Sure.
So when you started with your little pocket camera years ago, and you progressed to this system that I see in front of me, how long did it take you to progress to you purchase this, and then the costing of everything there? Are we looking at, that looks like the cost of the new car I'm about ready to buy.
It's $6,500.
How much?
$6,500.
Oh, that's not bad.
As things go, no, as I said, it's a nickel at a time. It's $1,000 for the big scope, $600 for the little scope. The focus motors are $225 each, and I put one. I bought. A lot of people don't put a second focus motor on the tracking scope, but I want the stars to be sharp, so it'll track as well as it can. Let's see, about $1,400 for the color for the monochrome cooled camera. About with filters, about $500 for the filter wheel, about $300 for the rotator, $180 for the flattener. What else does that leave? $2,200 for the mount. And
But you don't have to start off with all that.
no. But he's asking, where do you get from this? And I started with the DSLR because I had a full frame, just because I knew it was. Back to your question about does APS-C make a difference? Megapixels, actually, you don't need a lot. One of the calculations you get into is you can what's called oversample or undersample. And the pixel, just because your pixel's smaller doesn't mean you're going to get a finer grained picture. It's different from what we do here on the terrestrial side of things. So you'll see 6 megapixel astro cameras, and they do beautiful pictures. Because remember, we're stacking all these pictures and things are moving, so it's almost like you're not using the same pixel all the time. It's sort of a manufactured picture. And so what you want, the bigger the photo site, the bigger the pixel, the more light gathering you have. I have my Canon R5 is a 45 megapixel full frame. So it's about 4 micrometers wide, which is not very big, whereas a friend with a 26 megapixels has about a 7 micrometer pixel. So it'll gather more light. And what people talk about with this hobby is gathering light is like having a 5-gallon bucket in a rainstorm. The wider the bucket, the more rain you're going to catch. Or so that's why aperture is really, there are scopes that are this big, but they're very short. They're very short. They're an f2 scope. Mine's an f7 scope. So my light gathering takes more time. If I did an f2 scope, I could shoot 3 times as much. Okay?
I have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you said you go down to the Blackwater Refuge and stuff. So how do you get into places that need to be dark enough that you're away from the?
We went behind the visitor center and it was shielded from all its lights. And Phragmites was low enough that it wasn't in the way. Our to-do list is to call them and say, when you close the park, what does that mean? Do you shade it off? Am I going to get trapped if I go in there? Or are there any liabilities or things like that? Or can I go off to some of these points and look over the water and really have a free view of it? And it's just tough. It's tough. I've had nights, and I put this out to all of you. There's times when I've been in Oxford, when I visit my parents when they lived there, and for some reason, this was in the 90s, I'd walk in the backyard and I could see every star in the sky. The seeing was really good. Humidity was just right, no smoke, no moon, and it was just astounding. Saw that up in Maine too. Then I walked outside on my street. I live in Cooks Hope, and on Hope Circle, there's a north-south facing road, and I looked, and above this house I could see the Milky Way. And I took a better picture in Cooks Hope than I did down at the Blackwater. But it's all about the seeing. And
There's a Blackwater Photography Club on Facebook that can probably answer those questions.
oh, we can do that. One other site that I will show you. Let's see if I have. Well, no, it's not a good demonstration. I'll add that. I'm making a mental note, which hopefully I'll remember. There's a British website that localizes the weather, and it will show you a prediction in a histogram for every day, and it's got a line for high-level clouds, mid-level clouds, low-level clouds, when the moon rises, when it's twilight, winds, precipitation, and if everything's green under the hour thing for a long time, that means you can shoot. If you start to see it go yellow, it means you're getting 30% clouds, or you see the little misties starting to come up and everything. So you just start to accumulate a lot of sources, and it would not be possible, I think. I wouldn't be able to do this without the advances in the internet and computer technology, sensor technology.
Sounds like an astrophotography club is in order.
Yeah, I'm not a club person because I don't. A lot of times, you've got to. If it's done right, they're going to have some section that helps people get started, but they've got to have someone to scratch the itch of the advanced people that are trying to find out, how many fairies can dance on the head of a pin, sort of questions. All right. Thank you all for attending, and